Bree, anything you want to start off with?
Just that kind of with this training kind of derived from somebody's review that they thought it would be beneficial for them to kind of learn how to receive communication better. So it was just something that NICC was able to offer for more people to go through that training. So yeah, okay, I have Selena today.
Super. Well, welcome everyone. Some of you are familiar to me. I've seen you before. If you're having deja vu to the voice, that often happens too. If you've, I've been on site there a number of times with a variety of trainings. So welcome, welcome. Happy, I hope, 2021. 60 days till spring. I'll say that 60 days till spring. But meanwhile, if you would like winter, we're in good shape. For those of you, if I've not met you, my name's Selena Pearman. I hail just down the road. I'm in Waverly, right on Bremer Avenue, right smack in the middle of Waverly. This is what I spend my time doing, not usually on Zoom, usually I'm on site, but in this COVID kind of world, this has given us some new options. So today's request, and as Bree just mentioned, right, we know that within communication today, communication is different than effective communication. I can talk all day long, doesn't make it effective. And we know that communication just continues to be one of the biggest challenges in our organization. And, you know, in a pre-COVID 2019 world, I saw about 6,000 people, about 250 groups. A lot of people, a lot of companies, mostly in Eastern Iowa. And if I had asked any of those companies, any of those employees, what do you wish your company did better? The number one answer is, I just wish everybody would communicate around here better. And that shows up in the national research as well, as more and more employees crave it, but they're not entirely sure what they want or what it would look like, which is really on all of us as influencers, as leaders today. No matter what your job title is today, you've been either asked or voluntold to be here because what you do models out for a lot of other people. And so we want to take some focus time this afternoon on communication and specifically listening skills because of how critical that is, what that really looks like, feels like, sounds like in our teams. What I find really interesting is that listening effectively is one of the most powerful things we can do immediately to improve communication. With some additional attention and skills and focus on it, we can already improve. Literally this afternoon, you can improve communication. I was sitting with a company not too long ago, and the senior manager of the company and I have known each other a long time, and he knows my very weird sense of humor. And he said to me, he goes, Selena, I have a question for you. I'm like, what? And he said, remind me again why I pay you to come in here and tell me things I already know. And I said, well, because you love supporting our small business, right? And he said, no. He said, I know what it is. And I said, yeah, you know what it is. We all need reminders. We all need reminders. And even though he was having a little fun with me on that because he knew he could say it, right? There are days we all need reminders. And I'll give you my own. When my daughter just turned 18, and when she was somewhere at about age, 1.5, in that lovely sort of verbal stage where they mimic a lot of things, right? She's kind of a force to be reckoned with still at 18 now. But when she was about 1.5 years, going on 2 years, she starts stomping around the house. And this kid, she's solid, right? She's got some muscle to her. She's stomping around the house going, minute, minute, minute. And I'm like, okay, of all the words I thought she'd pick up from me, minute was not the one I figured she'd be repeating all over the house. My favorite word starts with an SH, ends with an IT. I figured that one would be the one she was mimicking back to me. But she's stomping around the house going, minute, minute, minute. I'm like, all right, weird kid, where's this coming from? Well, then I started paying attention. Annie, I'll be there in a minute. Annie, I will be there in a minute. Adrian Carol Pearman, I'll be there in a minute, right? It didn't take me very long to figure out why she was mimicking the word minute back to me, because it was probably my top word that I said to her, probably sounding like an exhausted, exasperated mother. Now, now years later, when I tell the story and when I do conferences and it's recorded and it's up on YouTube, you have to own the stories, right? So now my 18-year-old knows that I tell the story. And so every once in a while in our household right now, if I'm like, Annie, I'll be there in a minute, she'll own it from the other room and she'll go, minute, just as annoying as she can say it, right? We all have some habits. The key is awareness. Now, I still have to own it. And as a mom, sometimes I do that well, and sometimes I don't do that well, or my impatience shows a little more than it should. But at work, the same thing's true for us as leaders, right? No matter what your role, you're influencing others. So what we model, there's a national study out that talks about the fact that the number one complaint employees are bringing to managers, supervisors, and staff these days is that you say you're listening to me, but you're really not. You're multitasking on something else. You're thinking 3 conversations over and not present in this moment. Or you're already concluding what you're going to tell me before I finish speaking. That's what we want to focus on today, is really owning it. Really making sure that in that moment, in that conversation, not only are we physically present, but that we're actually taking that information and absorbing it, doing something with it, and using it to get some work done. So of course, we're all doing okay with this. You wouldn't be functioning in your positions successfully if you didn't, but it is absolutely something we can all work on. And what's always good for me, by the way, is when I pull up the material and get it ready and add things in and customize it for each group, I kind of go, oh, that's probably something I need to remember again. So this is always good for me to go back through as well. It's always something we can get better at. So let's start out. I'm going to go to some visuals here, and we'll mix it up this afternoon just a little bit. Now, I will give one disclaimer. We are recording the session. It's not being posted to YouTube. What it is we had a couple of people who got held up this afternoon due to some operations things that couldn't be in here. So we're going to capture the recording for them so they can catch up on it in the next day or so. So just be aware that that is not leaving Ashley. So I really don't want that to prevent you from talking and contributing to our discussion. So let's take a few minutes, and I want to start with a little bit of fun. I'm going to start with some trivia questions this afternoon. These are not in your handout, but it helps us start thinking about what is it that we need to understand about listening and how this impacts relationships. So what do you think on a scale from 1% to 100%? How much time in a day do people typically spend listening? Anyone want to put a number out there?
40%.
40%?
45.
40, 45. Anybody want to take higher or lower bets?
No, my ears are working all the time. I'd say 100% of the time.
Woo! Listen to that. All right. I'll take you up on that challenge. All right. Now you can. I don't know who that was. Who was that?
Jane.
All right. So now you can take that challenge up next time. See if they're listening that well, right? So what's the stat say? 55%. You're pretty darn close on that. Now, what I love about the point that was just made is we're hearing 100%. The idea is there's a difference between hearing and listening. Ears are open. I got you 100%. However, listening involves, right, that next level of processing. So we're starting to distinguish a little bit between hearing and listening. Another one, how many words do we listen to per minute? Anyone want to take a guess at this one? How many words per minute can we listen to? Really absorb, not hear, absorb.
50.
50? Anyone want to go higher than that?
51.
This one's a hard one.
I'll take you one.
This is probably one we're not as familiar with. This one is 250 words. The research says that we listen to per minute, that we really can truly absorb, process, and give feedback on. How much of what we have learned has been from listening? So if you think about how you process information, some of the things we think about in terms of processing, we hear it, we see it, we put our hands on it. It's one of the things we know about learning. But how much of that do you think comes from listening, according to the experts in the field? 30%, 50%, 70%? High, low on. All right. We gotta, let's see what the number is. There we go. 85% of what we have learned has been from listening. So visual is important. We are increasingly a visual society. There's no doubt about it. And if I want to help a new employee learn something, I need to have them see it, hear it, and put their hands on it, right? We need to adjust all of those learning styles. But much of what we retain is auditory, what we have listened to. All right. Okay, now for what might be the most annoying question of the training, and then I promise we'll move on. But anyone want to guess at what the most listened to song of all time is?
Baby Shark.
You know, I gotta think that's taken over the ratings. I would think that's got to be coming close. This one was around before Baby Shark, and it's going to age a few of us in the room, but it still holds the #1 annoying children's spot.
The song that never ends.
So I just gave you a clue. It's a children's song. Some of you grew up with it.
Is it on a movie? Ace Ventura?
Nope. I don't.
On a TV show?
Yeah, so it's related to, it showed up on some TV. Did it show up on a movie? Oh, but I'll give you another example. If you have ever been to a theme park, there's a ride named after it.
I don't know.
Fun
Isn't it
fact with
Small World or something like that?
You got it. You really
Yes.
don't want me to sing it, but it's a small world after all. Oh, ever since I found it, and I've been singing it ever since. So now I'm glad I have some company, because all of you who know the song are going to be singing it for the rest of the day. You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'd like to work with Ashley again, so don't hold it against me. All right. But that is the most listened to song of all time. I think we need to knock that one off its first place. So here's something else I really want you to consider, though. There are some stats we also know about how many people have listening difficulties. So this isn't just hearing, but it is hearing plus other types of barriers that prevent them from listening well, which could be ADD, ADHD. It could be other kinds of challenges of and not only attention, or so for example, I have a pretty significant hearing loss. It's not fixable by a hearing aid. I have so we know that people have all different kinds of physical abilities, as well as maybe other co-occurring kinds of conditions that may prevent them from listening well. And so what the stats tell us is about 38 million in the US, or about 12%, right? So about every 1 in 10 people. So if you're doing a team huddle, chances are someone in there has some challenges when it comes to listening well. And while those challenges may look very different from person to person, I think it's just good for us to be aware that if I'm hosting a meeting, if I'm making an announcement, if I'm explaining work instructions, if I'm trying to get, a conflict resolved, that it isn't just getting them to listen that I'm trying to get to, but I may have to overcome some barriers too. So let's talk about those. Really what we're thinking about is listening and the role of communication today. If we want to try and improve communication, what are some things we need to think about? So I'm going to ask first for the challenges. when it comes to communicating effectively, and we're going to try and stay a little more focused around listening, but we can keep this one a little broader, a little more general. What are some of the challenges you see in your day-to-day roles when it comes to communication? Just shout it out. Challenges when it comes to communication in our day-to-day work.
Background noise. Mhm.
Couldn't quite hear that one from the conference room. Sorry.
Background noise.
Speaking of funny that I just said that, right? Background noise, right? So just all the stuff in our environment. So that can be noise out on the floor, right? It could be distance. It could be, right? Feedback on, and in this world of Zoom and microphones and, you know, bumping up against something, there's just always noise around us. Machinery absolutely creates that. What else would you add to our list?
What you are saying may not necessarily be what the other understanding.
Yeah, saying versus understanding. I said this, but you understood that, right? So we can have some differences with that, that's not what I meant, but it's what you understood. Yeah, what else?
Masks.
Yeah. They have not done us any favors this year, have they? So now, especially for any of us with a hearing impairment, but on top of that, what I did not know until COVID was that how many nonverbals come below the nose, right? And certainly we knew the impact of facial expressions, but I don't know that we really realized, unless you're in healthcare in surgery on a daily basis, I think they had a little bit of heads up warning to us, but how much gets covered because of the mask. And we just misuse. We don't have the nonverbals to go with. I know in my own world, I didn't realize how much I was reading lips to get by, that the mask is now covering up. And especially going back to number one there, all that background noise, a lot of us were relying on that facial expression and lips to be able to hear and understand what people were saying or what they meant. Nice. Let's go for 5. 2 more. Anything that comes up on challenges?
Emails versus like face to face.
Yeah, what about that? Tell us some more about that.
You're not able to really get the full, I guess, expression from an email.
Yeah. So when we communicate via email, we don't get the nonverbals. Text messages, instant messages also apply. Face to face, I now can hear it. I can process the context of what's going on. I receive it. And then I have a little bit more to go on. But emails, text messages, IMs, it depends on my relationship with you. So if Bree and I are working together, and maybe we've had some challenges, maybe we've had some conflict, not that this would happen, Bree, but maybe we just haven't always agreed and we just struggle with the other. What we know about emails is that I read the email in the voice I perceived it was typed in. I receive it, I read it, and I go, well, reply all, right? And I read it with the voice I perceived it was typed in. This also happens across shifts, especially when we don't know each other. So if we don't know, and again, I know at Ashley is a small company, you know each other pretty well across the shifts, but if somebody's new or moved into a new role, sometimes we don't listen the same way to them because we just don't have the relationship. So we need to recognize just when we think about listening's impact on effective communication, right? We need it to be clear. We need it to be concise. We want deeper understanding. We want improved productivity, quality, safety, right? All of those things that we work so hard for, that when we put a little bit more effort into this, and it's a process, right? It does not come easily. But maybe today, for this particular session, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've just been so darn busy lately. I just haven't given this much thought. That's okay. The key is we have that opportunity to step it back up, to raise our awareness and really think about how could I do this better? Because we also know that with communication, there are some lessons we have learned that all players must have the skills and understanding to communicate well. Effective communication in organizations doesn't just happen. So we need the skills, but everybody comes to work with various types of skills. We don't, you know this, we don't all show up with the same set. So I'd encourage you in your team to consider, how do we improve everybody's skills in this? So maybe in a pre-shift huddle or in a quick training moment, right? We continue to reinforce these skills. We continue to ask everybody just to take an extra pause, to check for understanding, to make sure you're not multitasking. And I get the fact we feel like we have to multitask on responsibilities, but if you really want to listen effectively to someone, you need to be able to give them your full attention. What that starts with, and I'll tell you that example in my world, right? If I was standing in front of you, now I'm about, for those of you who have not met me, I'm about 5'2" with shoes on and hair curled. Okay, so not a lot of height. And I'm suspecting a number of you might be taller than me. So if I'm standing in front of you, listening to you, for me to give you my full attention, right? I'm looking at you, my feet are planted, my eye contact's on you, because if I don't focus on you, my squirrel brain will be 100 other places. So if I'm sitting in front of you, I'm leaning forward, I'm making eye contact, I'm leaning in to be able to make sure I give you my attention. But we also know, I've had to learn that over time. I didn't necessarily always know that people have different skills when it comes to understanding. Part of our role as leaders is to help them get better at this. When you take time to listen, pause, ask for clarity, ask questions, and you help model that for other people. We also know that effective organizational communication requires a climate or culture that supports effective communication. So how we talk about each other, I don't know, well, that's paint. I don't know, that's third shift. I don't know, that's the office, right? How we talk about each other matters. Because if we dismiss something and say, oh, well, you know, I'm not sure they know what they're doing anyways. When we dismiss something, we are now likely to give it less credibility when we're listening to it. Effective communication takes attention. It doesn't just happen. And I really want you to think about that, because the whole piece on listening this afternoon is being intentional, of really giving this some time and focus. Now, I also have known Ashley Industries for long enough to know you're very busy people, right? You've got a load that you are carrying to get results for your company, for your customers. And so I like to be really practical. I'll give you an example. And I'm going to stop the screen share here for just a minute. 60 seconds of pause. 60 seconds of pause before I send this email. Who's it to? Is my subject line clear? Is the attachment there? Do I sound grouchy? 60 seconds of pause saves me 3 minutes, 1 minute for 3. And I know this group well enough to know there's some days you need 2 minutes, right? 1 minute for 3. 1 minute of pause saves me 3 minutes of rework later. 1 minute for 3, which means before I send this email, who's in the to line? Is my subject matter clear? Is my attachment there? Do I sound grouchy? Saves me 3 minutes after I've hit send to go, oh, shoot. Go into my sent box, hit reply all, put the attachment there and go attachment, right? And then go talk to 2 people who now think I'm in a really bad mood today because I sounded grouchy in my email. That's what I want you to consider when it comes to listening for impact. Here's what we also know. When we pay attention, when we really focus on effective listening, the conversations are shorter. We do a better job of conversation. We solve more problems. We get more work done. Because if you're not paying attention and you're just scanning the conversation, you're like 3 conversations over and you're multitasking on other stuff, the conversations go longer and we don't get as much work done. So there's really good evidence for us to consider what is it that each of us can do to do this a little bit better. And even if everybody on this call did one thing this next week to be a little more present, to considering what the information you're receiving, processing it well, delivering that information back, if we all did just one thing a little bit better, even for the 7 or 8 people that are here this afternoon, the ripple effect you would feel from that is, oh, things went a little bit better. Oh, hey, look at this, right? We avoided some misunderstandings, or we, had a really good meeting or a conversation, or we problem solved something. That's what I want you to consider for today, is that a little bit more investment in this will actually save you some time. And I know this group, you need some time, right? You're busy. You got a lot of stuff you are trying to crank through. But a little bit of pause saves us some of that time. Okay, so I can make that argument. I want to open it up to the group. Why is this hard to do? Why is it just, I mentioned busy, right? Why is it hard to be good listeners? Distractions. There's just a lot going on around us, right? Lots of things that require our attention, and our focus can be moved around pretty easily. What else?
Attitude.
Yeah, what about that? Tell me a little more about what you mean with attitude.
So if I'm in a bad attitude, I'm obviously not going to want to listen to someone else's point of view.
Yeah.
As willing as if I was in a good attitude.
So attitude really becomes a filter. Am I receiving this information well? Am I interpreting it in a way that is helpful to the conversation? And attitude is one of those words I'm really a bit fascinated by it, because in US business culture in general, when you say somebody has an attitude, there's an immediate disposition that it's negative, right? We almost always have to qualify, is it a positive attitude? Because attitude tends to have a negative connotation. Now, not always, but something to think about, as you just mentioned, right? If I have a pretty good attitude about this topic, then I'm going to be more receptive of it. I'm going to listen to it better. If I really am not happy about this decision and you're sitting in a meeting, now your filters start going up and you hear that information differently than you would have before. Because again, in this exchange, right? If I send information to Katrina, if I tell you something and you receive it, you process it, you understand it, and you give me some feedback, you give me an answer, we're both filtering it. Anything that I send to you is through my own filter. I'm a woman, I'm 50, right? I've got some, whether I have experience on the topic or not, whether I like the topic or not, my own communication skills and being able to tell you this. And so I send that through my filters, my view, all those things. You receive it through all of yours, right? How you'll receive it, how you'll understand it. And so attitude adjusts a lot of that. If I have a positive attitude about the situation, I'm going to listen to it differently than I have a negative attitude about the situation. Absolutely is a barrier. What else makes this tough?
Who your audience is.
Yeah, tell me about that.
If maybe you enjoy the company of the others, you might listen a little bit better than maybe if you're you don't like the person or whatnot.
Yeah, good reminders on that. So when we think about best communication practices, where I'm always saying, analyze your audience. So if I'm speaking to my senior team, if I'm speaking to corporate, if I'm speaking to another location, if I'm speaking out to my team, I always have to think like my audience. What do they know already and what do they need from me? Well, listening plays a huge part in that, because if it's an audience who knows me and I'm speaking to them with information that they need, then hopefully they're listening better because we have a relationship, because that whatever, again, that audience piece is there because I'm landing it. I'll give you an opposite example. Think about a time where someone walked up to you, dumped a whole bunch of information on you, and walked away. And you're sitting there going, the heck is this? What am I supposed to do with this? Right? You got dumped on with a whole bunch of information. Someone deposited that, but it's really hard for you to listen and process it when you have no idea where they're coming from. So I love to remind us that as influencers, as leaders, we got to meet people where they're at. We got to meet people where they're at and bring them with us. That's the power of listening. That I have to analyze my audience to meet people where they're at, understand how they're going to view this, and communicate to them. Anything else you want to add to our list of what makes this hard?
Your values versus theirs.
Values. Yeah. Why does that challenge us?
Well, in the workplace, my expectations and what I want to go on are completely different from a lot of my subordinates.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes getting them to understand where you're coming from is not easy.
Mm-hmm. Getting them to see your perspective, because again, if they have nothing to compare it to or nothing to connect it to, right? They can't, which is why, and I'll give you an example. There's if you've heard the proverb, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my moccasins, there's various versions out there. There's a number of companies I've worked with over the years where we've implemented a walk a mile in my shoes afternoon. And there's lots of ways you can do this. I'm just going to give you one example. And because what we've seen in the research is, if I can spend a little bit more time with you to see it from your perspective, I'm going to understand it differently. And so walk a mile in my shoes kind of concept is, so I'll give you one company example. What they decided is, it was the third Thursday afternoon. It doesn't matter when you do it. They picked the third Thursday of every afternoon or every month that you could sign up for a slot, which means not everybody got to do this every week. That would be chaos. But you got to sign up for a slot. If there was a department you wanted to visit for an hour and you wanted to learn a little bit more about it. Now, again, it works a little different across shifts, but we can talk about that. And you could sign up and you could say, I'm going to go visit this department for 1 hour. And that department was ready for you. It wasn't like a free for all. You just show up, you sit in the corner and you watch. They were ready for you. And what they would show you is the work they did, how it related to their position, and what they wanted to have them understand. And what research has said is, in as little as 1 hour, people see things differently. This is true across shifts, right? When we have good handoffs and transitions between shifts, when we give handoff information and it's received well, and there's a good relationship there, we process it differently. And so to your point about perspective, that's really important. Now, like you said, especially from a leadership standpoint, the reason that relationship becomes so important is because you have a set of information, ideals, values, that you're trying to transmit out to your team. And they're going to see it from their perspective. They're not going to see it from your experience and your perspective and your leadership role. They're going to see it from theirs, which reminds us how important it is to keep working at this, to keep putting it in ways and giving people experiences so that they hear it in new ways. Now, some employees will get that. Some employees will eat that up. They'll run with it. They'll work at it. Some employees will go, yeah, okay, I'll work at this a little more. Right now, I don't know if there's anybody at Ashley like this, but I'll share with you what I see in other companies. We have that other group of employees, you know, not the run with it, not the okay, but with the other folks who go, nope, above my pay grade. You can't make me want to understand that. I don't know. Got anyone around there? Stubborn complainers. Okay, maybe you don't have, maybe you don't have any anymore. Oh, good. I'm coming to work there. Oh, good. All right. So even grouchy, right? Grouchy employees have filters. They're not hearing things through. You can't change my mind. And we know we've got some people who got mad at something like 10 years ago and they're still ticked off. Emotion, experience, all of that can impact the way we listen to other people. Yeah. So we tie all of these together. We've named a lot of things already in kind of this first half hour or so. And so what we're trying to do is raise our awareness of just owning it. This is not easy. It doesn't just happen automatically. But when we give it a little bit more effort, when we give it a little bit more attention, this can improve. And when you've got a leadership team committed to it, of, okay, this is not easy, and I still got a lot of stuff to do, we can work at this, make it better, and move at that next step. Comments, questions, anything that you're thinking about that we haven't talked about so far you want to throw out to the whole group?
About lack of communication,
Tell me about that. What are you thinking are examples?
like just not communicating. I don't want to talk to you because I don't like you. I'm not going to communicate that we had troubles last night because I don't have time. I just don't have time right now to communicate with you because I got to do this. Another one would be knowledge. If you go out and try to communicate something to somebody and they don't have the knowledge that you have, then it's pretty hard to communicate to them what you're trying to tell them if you don't teach them how to do the project in the first place.
Okay. So I hear a really couple of good examples. So knowledge, right? If I have this knowledge and you have that knowledge, and I've got to bring you along in it, I've got to break it down. And not everybody, you know, one of the things I've done a little bit of work there at Ashley with peer-to-peer training is for us to be able to share, train somebody else or educate somebody else or help them learn something. We've got to do it in a way that they'll understand. And that can be really hard. Or if I've got the knowledge, that feels pretty good. It's mine. And when we hog that knowledge, other people can't learn. And so it is a challenge with communication for me to pass that knowledge on to somebody else and have them willing to receive it. So when the other two examples I heard is I don't have time. And it's so true that, right? We get busy. I don't want to spend the time to do this. But if we can, especially as leaders, start coaching and using in our words a little bit more like, hey, it's okay. Take a few minutes to do that. A lot of times we think it takes a lot longer when it really only takes short amount of time. Now, what I love about your examples is the difficult behavior. I don't like you. I don't have to. I don't want to tell you anything, right? And that's where we've got to do some coaching of saying, here's the business requirement. Here's what a good handoff looks like. Here's what a good meeting looks like. Here's what a huddle looks like. How do we set some standards so that everybody understands what our parameters are? So when you are doing a handoff, you're doing a changeover, you're orientating somebody new to your area, here are the things we work on so that we have key pieces there that everybody gets. Now, of course, that's going to change and we can have SOPs and keep things updated, but I don't like you, right, is a set of difficult behaviors. And we've got to be able to set the standard to say, it doesn't matter if I say it that way, whether I like you or not. Here's the expectation. Here's what I need you to do. Here's how we communicate here. Easier said than done, but we have to keep chipping away at it. Good. Let's add in a couple other things. I'm going to go to a screen share here, and I'm going to go back to the handout, a couple things we have listed here. And so I want to start with a couple of key points. Remember, and I've alluded to it already, hearing is not listening. So hearing is certainly one of our five senses, right? And while this is going to sound a little bit of 101, I want you to consider it. We take information in about our world around us through our five senses. That's it. That's how it all comes through. And so when we hear something, that is the auditory process of hearing sound waves. So that information comes in and it goes to our brain for processing. Listening involves more than simply hearing the words that float past our ears. It's an active process of interpreting information and making meaning of it. So this is our interpretation piece. So I'm going to ask you to take a couple of minutes. And so we're going to take a few minutes as a group. I'm going to ask you to rate your listening ability on a scale from 1 to 100. I gave you a wide range, 1 being low, 100 being the high. How would you rate your own listening ability? Is this a 60, a 70, an 80, a 20? How well do you think you listen? And then I'm going to ask you to take a couple of categories of people. So your supervisor, your coworkers, maybe team members. If you have direct contact with customers, you can choose your category. If you don't do all of them, that's okay. But how would they, notice the difference, how would they rate your listening ability? So if you put yours at a 75, how would your supervisor rate it? Now, if they happen to be on the call today or sitting next to you, you're all one of these categories to another. You can double check your score with them. But I want you just to take a few minutes and put a number to it. And there's a good reason why I'll share with you in just a moment. So take a quiet just moment to do that. Once you get the scores done, I'm going to have you look at letter C there. There are 4 questions, and just take a few minutes to think through those questions and make a few notes. What are the qualities of a poor listener? How does a poor listener make you feel? What are the qualities of a good listener? And how does a good listener make you feel? Just capture that for just a few minutes. Writers can write, thinkers can think, but score yourself and then give those 4 questions some consideration. We'll take just about 5 minutes to do this. All right. So anyone willing to tell us your score? Or if your number changed. So if you had one score, now I could put, for those of you who have a spouse, how would your spouse rank your listening skills? And I'm not asking my teenage daughters, I'll tell you that. Anyone want to share out what you noticed about your scores, or as you look, those of you in the conference room, if you're looking at your neighbor's scores, or maybe Colin is looking at Randy's score, right? What do you see in that first part? Did your numbers change?
Now we were pretty equal.
Okay, which is really what we want, right? We want to be good listeners. What I would encourage us to think about is if there's somebody you're struggling with right now, maybe you're tuning them out. Is there someone that you're just not being as good of a coworker, a leader, a team member to? And I'll give you my own example. I worked with a woman named Joyce for a lot of years. She knows I tell this story because when you do conferences, kind of like that YouTube video I shared earlier about my daughter, and stuff gets recorded, you have to own your stories. So I've worked with a woman named Joyce for years, so she knows I tell this story. And here was my challenge. I like Joyce. Nice gal. No issues with her whatsoever that way. But when she called me, she was at another location. When she called me, it took me 40 minutes to get off the phone with her. Okay. And while I liked her and I really was fine talking to her, I'm like, seriously, it got stuff to do, especially when I was in that go mode, right? So she called me one day and I'm using all my good active listening skills. I'm like, yeah, oh, good point. I'm doing all the stuff I'm supposed to be doing, right? But you know what I'm doing? I'm clicking on my keyboard behind the call. And true story, we're 20 minutes in the call and she goes, Selena, and I went, yes. She goes, I don't have your full attention. Busted. She called me on it in the middle of the call. I'm like, you're right. I am not, and I'm sorry. I should be giving you my full attention. I'm working on a report. I need to have it out this afternoon, and I didn't tell you that. So she said, what can we do? Because I'd really like to talk this through with you. And I said, tell you what, let me finish up my report. So that is off my deadline this afternoon. I will call you back and you will have my full attention. And I guarantee you, every time we talked after that, she had my full attention because it wasn't fair to her. But I needed to be honest with her too and say, I can't do this right now. And we see that with the multitasking, especially with technology, typing behind the scenes, multitasking on our phone. That's part of our challenge. So we want to make sure if your score stayed consistent, you try to listen to team members, you try to listen to your boss, you try to listen to coworkers. But if there is someone who just maybe steps on your last nerve a little bit more or irritates you or you feel like is a waste of time, we got to take the high road on this. We've got to be able to step it up and go, you know what? It's really important that I pay attention, that if I'm going to invest this time with this person in this moment, even if it's 2 minutes worth, giving work directions, I need to make sure they have my full attention. Yeah. Anybody else want to make an observation on your numbers or what you're thinking with that? Anybody you know you've had you don't have to name them. And if they're sitting next to you, don't name them. But, right? We all have moments, right? We all have good time, good moments, bad moments. Yeah. Okay, so let's take it to C. What do poor listeners do that just don't represent it well? What do poor listeners do?
They have bad body language.
Bad body language. Okay, so what might be an example of bad body language?
Looking around.
No eye contact.
Okay, eye contact. Now, I will say generally, US business culture, we're expecting some eye contact. It's just really part. Now, I will say we get some variation of that culturally. certainly there are different cultural practices that value different types of eye contact. So we just need to at least acknowledge that this afternoon. We also know that there are conditions, experiences that eye contact is just less comfortable. And so we just need to be aware of that. In general, though, we're looking for eye contact. It's our number one visual of, are you paying attention to me? Looking around, eye contact, poor listeners, right, are distracted. They're doing other things. They're not tuned in. What else makes for a poor listener?
Interrupting.
Interrupting. Why do we interrupt?
I didn't hear you. What'd you say, Selena?
Why do we interrupt? Why do interruptions happen? Anyone want to? There are multiple reasons. Anyone want to take a?
Just our mind jumping around,
Mind jumping around. I love that.
trying to prepare what you're going to say before you need to say it.
Yeah.
You
Sometimes
think what
it's-
you have to say is more important than what they're saying.
Yeah, some ego gets involved. What I have to say is more important than what you need to say.
Thinking you know maybe the answer or what to say too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to end the conversation.
Yeah. I'm interrupting you so that we can get this over with so I can go on to something else because I really don't want to, right? And I'll even add one more to that whole list. That's a fantastic list, by the way. I'll add one more, and that is because I'm just plain enthusiastic. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, right? I really want to add in, not because I know more from an ego standpoint, but I really want to talk about this. And so I always say, if you know you have some interrupting tendencies, I don't care if you have to sit there and picture yourself covering your mouth with your hand, hold it back and really practice the pause. Let that other person finish because you could learn something in that moment. And I have to work on this all the time. And a lot of mine is due to enthusiasm. I just want to jump in, offer something, and I have to go, whoa, no, not my space and time. What do I need to do to step back and give this person the space and time they need to communicate to me so that I can best respond to them? How does a poor listener make you feel?
Annoyed.
Annoyed. Good start. What else?
Belittled.
Belittled. Yeah,
Not important.
not important. Oof.
What you just talked about was irrelevant.
Yeah, irrelevant, right? What you just offered. Yeah. Here's what I know about this group. I've been around here long enough to know you wouldn't be on this call today if you intended to do that to anybody else. There's no intention here that you want to annoy or belittle. Now, I'm not saying that that's not true for the rest of humanity. Okay. But if you're in here working on this, even if, Bree twisted your arm, right? But right. Even if you were told to be in here today, right? You wouldn't be in the spot you're in if you really meant to belittle, annoy, and devalue other people. So there's a reminder, right? We all need to be more present, focused on this, recognizing that it has an impact because I want to be known as a good listener. It's a commitment. It's a discipline to make sure that I can be the kind of leader and coworker and coach that I can be for somebody else. So what do good listeners do, right? What are the qualities of a good listener? So if we turn some of those around, they have active body language. So they're leaning forward, they're focused in, what other things does a good listener do besides active body language?
Ask good questions.
Ask good questions. So how do you know what kinds of questions to ask?
Well, if they were paying attention, they have an idea of what they're asking about.
You might have to take notes You might have to capture a couple keywords in front of you if you're concerned about remembering. And, true story, we got a lot of stuff going on in our environment, and I'll even add a little COVID fog into that. We're seeing people just having a hard time retaining stuff. There's just lots of stuff going on in our personal lives and our professional lives, and face masks. So it's okay to jot down a couple of notes. It's okay to add a couple of keywords so that you remember what you want to ask questions about. So they have active body language, eye contact, leaning forward into the discussion. They ask good questions to clarify, to confirm understanding. What else do good listeners do?
Repeat back what they heard.
Sorry, I got some interference with that. What was that?
Repeat back what they heard.
Thank you. Repeat back. So right? So I'm paraphrasing it back. What I heard you say is this accurate? Or it seems to me that this frustrated you. Do we need to decide on the next step? I'm somehow clarifying what they just said so we know what to do next. And I can't ask those questions if I'm not paying attention. So I need to be able to repeat it back. The risk, and if you look at the research on this and the experts out there, the risk with that is when I repeat it back, I sound like I'm belittling you, and we have to guard against that. So what you told me was, so I got to watch my body language that comes with that, because it can come across as, so what you're telling me is you can't, right? I want to make sure that I'm not doing that I'm really saying, okay, so for us to work better together on this, it sounds like what you need from me is, and so I'm checking for understanding in those statements, and I'm not belittling it. Because a good listener, right, helps us feel valued, that our input has value as well, right? What else comes to mind when you think about how a good listener makes you feel? Accomplished. Yeah, I love that. Feels good, right? I feel affirmed, accomplished, probably builds some confidence that what I do is at least has some value. So listening is one of those best communication tools we have available to us immediately to improve on. And by doing so helps improve our relationships. But what it takes is attention. What it takes is enough pause. And I don't mean hours. I mean 60 seconds of pause to say, how could I be better right now in this conversation? So if I were in the room with all of you, I'm going to pick on Dan for a minute. Can I pick on Dan? Anyone want to nominate Dan to be picked on?
We would love it.
All right. So let's say Dan talks a lot. I don't know. Is that true?
I don't think so.
Okay. So let's say I'm in the room with you and Dan says, hey, Selena, I need to talk to you. And we're working together and you don't even have to be a talker for this, but like, I got other things I need to do. Right. But you're talking and you're talking and you're talking. And, I can say, hey, Dan, yep, makes sense. Hey, Dan, yep, that's okay. But if I spend my whole time talking to Dan, trying to back out of the back door in that conference room, right? I'm not sending Dan a message that this conversation is very important to me, right? I send mixed messages. And so oftentimes in the hallway, out on the floor, right? If I'm backing away from you while we're having a conversation, it is sending you a mixed message that I'm really not valuing this relationship. So it would be much better for me to stand in front of Dan and say, Dan, I hear this is important to you. I understand you need an answer from me. I need to be somewhere else right now. Can I come back and see you? Or can we meet on this tomorrow? Or can we take this up at the huddle? But to send mixed messages, right, is not going to take care of the relationship with Dan and probably create more misunderstandings. What about across shifts? Tell me about how we need to listen better between shifts or departments. What are some of the challenges you see at Ashley between shifts and departments when it comes to hearing each other?
not fully understanding what you're talking about unless you're face to face. I can send an email to third shift, and then in the morning when I get here, I didn't understand what you wanted from that. So
Even at that, even face to face, you know, one shift's ready to get out of here, you know, so there's half information when you are talking face to
Well,
face.
I think with guys too, sometimes you're passing on information to the second shift, and second shift goes past the third shift, and then there's some middlemen in there too, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, sometimes it's now on emails, I think there's just an opportunity for all of us to take a fresh look at how we communicate what in an email. I say with a sense of humor, I never realized when we grew up, this would be like the adult game of telephone. You remember telephone growing up? You start the message at one end and it ends up completely different at the other end. I never really understood work was going to be that, but it really feels like the adult game of telephone, right? And so when you think about emails, I didn't understand what you meant, you know, and especially between shifts, if we can't clarify a lot, it means we need to spend that extra minute or two before we send that email. Is my purpose clear? The action clear? And what's the deadline, or what's needed out of this and by when? And it's called the PAD effect, PAD, purpose, action, deadline. So that we're really clear, so that the message is received, understood, and I know what to do with it. And so that might be something to think about. Could we give that email just a little extra pause to say, how will my audience read this? And how will third shift receive this information? Will they know what to do? Because I think about where those pain points are. Think about maybe where those misunderstandings happen and what we could do to give them a little bit more attention. Good. So let's do this. We built just a quick stretch break because in kind of Zoom time and in a 2-hour session, just to give everyone a quick stand up and move around. So let's do this. We will come back at 10 after 3. So it's just a little under 10 minutes. Stretch, do what you need to do, get something to hydrate with, and we'll come back at 10 after 3 and take on our next set of information. Okay. All right. I'll see you back at 3:10. Back together and look at some steps, look at some things that we can do to do this better. Hopefully we got everybody back. All right. Give it just another minute here. I'm going to go back to a screen share as we look at some of the best practices that are listed in your handout.
Okay.
So I mentioned before our stretch break that listening is that amazing best communication tool we have. We have the most control over it. It really just represents us as that best we can be. But I want to give you another something to think about for just a moment. In every conversation, there are hundreds of things you could listen for. So I want you to consider for a moment how you choose. Anytime somebody's telling you something, you can hone in on just a variety of things. So I like to flip this around and remind us that if you are speaking to somebody else, you can help them get ahead of this game. You can say, you know, if Bree walks up to Paula and says, Paula, I just need to talk to you for a minute. And Paula says, how can I help? And Bree continues to tell her some stuff. And Paula says, you know, as I'm listening to this, what would be most helpful for you? And Bree may say, I just need to vent this. And then Paula knows what her role is. Bree may say, I need some help trying to solve this. And Paula says, okay, I can help you do that. Because in that conversation, there are a number of things Paula could be thinking. Why is Bree telling me this? What does she want me to do with this, right? Am I supposed to answer something on this? She's wondering in her head. And so one of the things that happens is if our listener is trying to figure out what am I supposed to be listening for, then they're not listening to you, they're asking questions in their head. This also, by the way, applies to families and spouses, right? Same thing in our own households. If you're venting or you're sharing information with a family member or a spouse, you can give them a heads up. Hey, I just need you to listen to this. I don't need you to solve it. I just need you to listen, right? That's fine. Then that tells your listener what you're expecting of them. So in every conversation, we have to decide what is it that we're listening for, because we can't pay attention to everything. So you may want to think about, again, what's my audience told me? What do I know about this person? What might be most of concern to them in this particular situation? Can I ask a clarifying question? What would be most helpful for you from this conversation? Is it listening? Is it helping you come up with an action plan? Is it solving something? You can ask a clarifying question to find that out as well. I think we overlook that. That's been kind of one of those things for a lot of years. I went, oh, wow, I should be paying better attention to that. Anyone want to comment on that or expand an idea on that?
I know for me, not in the workplace, but at home with my significant other, like he'll vent about work and he works at another manufacturing company. And then I'm like, well, why do you do it that way? Why are they doing that? Because I'm just so used to our climate here. So I don't think I'm actually listening. I'm more of.
You're evaluating that guy. He's a great example though, right? And I think it's really honest that I'm critiquing that company. I forget about, oh, okay, you're sharing this with me. What can I do for you? Yeah.
Yep.
I think relationships can be prone to that. Anybody else have something on the mind as you think about that idea? Let's look at a few more of those barriers, right? So I'm gonna, that was my fault. The words you say, right? So sometimes with this, it's it's also paying attention to even just word patterns. When we say no, what we can't do can sometimes change our listening. So if you step back and listen to the words you say to people during a typical day, how many things do you say that are positive? How many examples can you think that are negative? So when we say it can't be done, it's not possible, we never do it that way, what might be turning your listeners off? And so when we think about improving communication, we also need to be paying attention to vocal patterns. What are the word choices we use? Now, that doesn't mean we have to be this sunshiny unicorn, Pollyanna, everything's beautiful. But paying attention to the words we say can have a connection then to the way that information is received and listened to and acted upon. We made the connection in nonverbals earlier too. We'll just hit a couple of things here pretty quickly, just to make sure we covered all of it. Nonverbals, we mentioned facial expressions and some of the challenges with masks in particular right now. Gestures. So in my world, since I like to talk with my hands and those can get pretty distracting, right? I have to learn to not do that. It looks different on Zoom when I'm on a big screen or on your screen of where I put my hands. That makes a difference. But we need to pay attention to what those gestures are. If they're in my back pocket, if they're in my front pocket, if I'm swaying, if I'm rocking, just really paying attention to our body movement, our tone, our pitch, our speed of voice, how that affects, right? Effective communication and especially listening. Am I conveying a tone, a pitch, a speed that's easy to listen to, or is it conveying to them that I'm listening? So I'll give you an example. I love listening to people on the phone try to get somebody else off the phone. And here's what I listen to. I'll listen to a caller go, yep, uh-huh, yeah, got it, yep. And what we try to do is we speed up the caller with our words, our pitch, and our speed. We speed it up trying to get them off the phone. Paying attention to those word patterns is important. So if I'm on the phone going, I hear you, makes sense to me. Is there any other additional steps we should take? Right? And if I really do need to get them off the phone, you could say, I really need to wrap up and move to my next meeting. Is there anything else we should make sure we cover right now? Or can I follow up with you later? But using, when we're quiet, the talker doesn't know. So we should be asking, or at least setting some parameters back. If we're, yeah, right? And we're not quite as verbal as we want to be. We're giving some sounds back, but we're speeding them up based on what we're saying back. We've talked body language and posture. Personal space is certainly unique right now. Just everybody trying to stay away from everybody else. That's a little bit unique topic right now. Eye contact, we've talked about. Touch, even on how we convey even compassion, right? In a non-COVID world, some of that's personal space where we might reach over and touch somebody's elbow or arm as a sign that we're connected or we're listening to them. Touch is one of those things that, of course, depends on the relationship. It depends on the context, depends what that looks like, especially in a workplace setting, but just paying attention to that. And even appearance. On Zoom, in this virtual communication, I've been coaching a company president now for a number of months, but one of the things that's come up since Zoom arrived, or all this video conferencing, is, and if you have your screen set up where you can see me, I'm ducking down. So literally I've been coaching him because he's been showing up on camera like this, like you only see the top of his forehead. And I'm like, whoa, you got to own this space, right? If you're delivering content, this is where you need to be. True story. I shouldn't even tell this. I will. I was teaching a class last night to working adults, all like us. And I had someone now they were at home. Okay. And this is a graduate class. They're in class earning a grade. I had somebody show up on my Zoom call for class in a bathrobe. I can't even make that up. Business student over the age of 35 in a bathrobe. And I went, hey, so there's a little coaching going on today, because I'm like, do not show up in a bathrobe next week. Not going to happen. So I say that, there's been lots of Zoom jokes around about the top half is dressed up and the bottom half not. But, I think whether we're face to face, we can be casually dressed, but appear, right, confident, professional, put together. And it's really important so that people understand how we convey that effective communication by paying attention, by being actively engaged. So maybe today for you, coming out of this session of reminders this afternoon, you want to pay attention to more of your nonverbals. One of the ways to do that is find a partner on the call today who you can say, you know what, one of the goals for the next couple of weeks that I want to work on is, and ask for their help. So if Paula and I are working together and I say to Paula, so Paula, one of the things I really want to pay attention to in the next couple of weeks is not interrupting. As we have conversations, as you see me in meetings, would you help me pay attention to those times I'm interrupting? Keep a tally, give me a sign, whatever that picture sign is, right? Give me a sign that you're like, Selena, back off, you're doing it again. And engage somebody else to help you. Because we don't have to do this alone. There's a little bit of nice vulnerability there that says, hey, Paula, help me out with this. Or, Tammy asks Katrina, right? Whatever that is, it's being able to help each other out. Or nicely saying to a coworker, somebody in this call today, to say, I've noticed that when this happens, it's impacting people this way. Just wanted you to know. Because that's the other thing, especially with feedback, that when you give me good, helpful feedback, if I go all ego on you and I start making excuses and I start saying, well, it wasn't me, it was that, it was this, it was that, you're maybe not going to be very helpful to me again. Really consider being able to do that for each other. What I love is this quote: the leading cause of miscommunication is communication itself. We've got to pay attention. This takes effort. So we want to make sure that we're not prejudging the person you need to listen to. You know, that person who comes walking down the aisle, wherever you're at in the building, and you're like, oh no, here we go, right? So don't, be careful not to prejudge. Formulate a response. You don't want to formulate a response or a rebuttal before they're finished with their message. You want to be careful. If you only listen for facts, you're probably going to miss some stuff. So make sure that you're not just listening for facts, that you're misunderstanding other kinds of cultural cues, whether that is hierarchy, whether that's background and experience, whether that's educational experience. There's lots of things that can go into other kinds of cultural cues. And we want to make sure we prevent the barrier of multitasking. So today, what we're trying to do is own it. I think there's an amazing ability we have as leaders today to say, yep, I do that one. And here's how I need to own it, because all of us have something we need to work on. So we can first assess our readiness. Are you distracted? I have a colleague, we were talking about this, I've been doing some coaching with her. And one of the things that just messes her up is that email prompt on the bottom right of her screen. So she's working on something, she's trying to be present in other conversations, but as soon as that pop-up comes up telling her she's got a message, whoop, squirrel, right? She's on that cue. She has put a sticky note on the bottom of her computer screen that says pause, just to remind herself that when that pops up, she has a choice to make. So assess your readiness, right? When you think about focusing on the speaker, turn directly to the person, make eye contact, nod your head, use good facial expressions. I bet all of us have been on working at a station, typing away, working on whatever we're working on, and somebody walks up to us, asks us a question, we answer them without turning our head. They hear it, they walk away, and then a couple minutes later we go, oh shoot, what did they say? What did I tell them? So we need to make a decision in that moment. What gets our attention? I may need to turn away from my computer screen, look at that person, answer them, then come back to my computer screen. Or I may need to say to that person, hang on just a minute, I got to finish the sentence I'm typing or I'm going to forget what I'm typing. I finish that and then I turn to them. But we've got to be ready to listen. Here's what I love also that happens in open workspaces. Let's say Randy walks up to Paula and says, hey, Paula, can I just talk to you about this for a minute? And Paula looks up at him and says, might as well. I lost track of what I'm working on anyways, right? All right. Right? Just because you can walk up to someone does not mean they're listening to you, right? And so timing becomes really important. if Randy walks up to Paula and Paula's trying to get paperwork done to get the heck out of Dodge right now, and Randy wants to talk, not that that would happen. Would that happen? All right. Right? So just because Randy's talking doesn't necessarily mean Paula's listening. Or vice versa, right? So we got to own it, right? If I walk up to Bree and say, hey, Bree, can we talk about this? I got to give her a moment to pause. She's got to determine in that moment, hey, Selena, I can give you my attention right now or I can't. And this is really important, especially with our employees doing the work they do in all the various areas at Ashley. They're focused on what they're working at. And here's what leaders do. They walk over and go, hey, and we bark something, or we bark, whatever, that was poor choice of words, but right. We sometimes we do bark, but we give that, we deliver that information. We say it, we walk away, but we may not have even had their attention because they had to shift with task shift in that moment to go, I'm working on this. I'm moving heavy stuff. I'm hanging this. I'm maneuvering this. You walk up to me, you say something, you walk away. I got to process what I was just doing, what I heard in a mask with barriers, with noise. And I've got to figure out, did I just hear you correctly? Want to pay attention to that. Number 2, clearing your mind. I don't know about you, but I got a lot of voices that coincide in my head a lot. So here's what we know about that, right? Put your internal chatter in check. Share your understanding in your own words. I gave you a few examples of this earlier. It sounds like let me see if I'm understanding you, so. And then whatever that explanation is. So this is just giving us an opportunity to listen at a deeper level, really convey back to that person, you have my attention, here's what I'm hearing from you. 3, allowing silence. Ooh. Think about what that means for a minute. Silence can be really uncomfortable. I stop and you're starting to think, I don't know, can I hear her? Right? Zoom has done this to us. I don't know, can I hear her? Is she connected? Is she on mute? Face to face, one of the things that from a training standpoint is one of the best practices out there is if I'm in a classroom training and I ask you a question, I am supposed to wait 10 seconds for you to respond. Think about how long 10 seconds is. 1, whew, that feels like an eternity. And especially if you are an internal processor. So let's go introverts, you gain your energy from being by yourself. You may need 7 seconds to think before responding. And yet extroverts, you get uncomfortable after about 2 seconds. So we really need to acknowledge our own style and the style of our audience. At Ashley, you've got some processors. They think about thinking about it. And they need a little bit of silence to be able to process their answer and respond to you. That can really help us listen more effectively. Maybe your challenge in the next couple of weeks is just to be a little bit more mindful on pause, on quiet, giving people a chance to respond. Now, do it in increments, because if you immediately give them 10 seconds, they're going to think something's wrong. Right? So give them a little bit more time to kind of get used to that, because a lot of times we try to fill in space, especially if you're a speaker and you're nervous. And I don't mean speakers in terms of audience. I mean speaker in terms of, I'm trying to talk to you about this. So I come over to talk to Dan about something and I ask him a question and I give him some time to think about it. But when we're uncomfortable with the silence, we start filling it in. And so I start filling it in with stuff. And Dan's like, seriously, already, just be quiet. I'm thinking about what you already asked me, right? Just giving each other that time and space. All right, so what can we do to be better? Some things we've talked about: limit multitasking. You need to know what your limit is. We have multitasked ourselves into some inefficiencies. If you consider, right, single tasking is what they're actually suggesting we do better. When we single task, whatever you're doing, give it your full attention. We tend to multitask ourselves into inefficiencies. I get the fact you might have to scan for a number of things. What's going on over there? What do I know about that? These things are going on over there. You're scanning for multiple things, but whatever you're doing in the moment, pay attention to that. When somebody is speaking at you, right, to you, pay attention to the speaker with your body language. Turn towards them, lean in, focus here. What are they saying? And process it in your mind. I'm hearing this. I'm not sure about this. I need to ask about that. Because it gives you the ability then to observe the speaker's nonverbals. Do those nonverbals match the message? Do those nonverbals match the message? Now, in my house, after 27 years of marriage, if I were to do something like arms folded and me saying, I'm fine, probably sending mixed messages, right? My husband would tell you that's something I need to work on. I can't say I'm fine in that tone with that body language because he's going to go, oh crap, what happened, right? So we need to make sure that we are not mixing up those nonverbals. Paraphrasing what you've understood to check for accuracy. Take that pause. We go back to what we mentioned earlier, 60 seconds of pause saves you 3 minutes of rework later. So if I paraphrase it back, Paula, let me understand. Is this what you said and what you needed from me? A little bit of check-in there saves me, okay, well, I think I understood her. So I go off and do something and Paula's like, that's not what I wanted you to do. And I'm like, well, that's what I thought you told me. But if I check in with her and confirm that I listened to this correctly, I'm going to be in better shape. And again, not everybody has been trained with those skills, right? Not many of us learned great listening growing up in our families. We didn't always have good mentors to do this well. What each of you have the ability to do is to mentor somebody else in this, to really model it and help them be better listeners too. Even from today, right? You can set a goal for listening. What do you want to work on in the next couple of weeks to improve your own communication? Consider what you know about the topic that the speaker is talking about beforehand so you can listen for certain cues. Own your brain. If your attention wanders, intentionally bring it back. Make sure that if you've committed to something, you're not doing something else, like still answering email or texting on your phone or completing other paperwork when somebody's trying to speak. Take note of what you don't understand. If they said something that you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'll give you an example that I for some reason lately have had a lot of, is I'll be on a call or in a training with someone and they'll use a phrase I'm just not familiar with. And I will stop and ask, help me understand, what does that mean to you? And have them define it for me. Because if they continue to use that abbreviation and I don't know it, I'm going to continually miss that message. We also want to think about what are some of those questions we might still have at the end of that conversation. And is now the time to bring them up? Or do I need to wait till another point or another time? Okay. So if we think about, so in just a minute or two, let's open it back up for some questions. I want you to think about some goals that you could work on coming out of today. If we think about building that listening muscle, today we've talked about, you need to remind yourself of the difference between listening and hearing, 2 different processes. Ask other people. If you scored yourself an 80 or a 90 and you think you're a good listener, check in with some other people. What do I do that's helpful for you when I'm listening? What would you like to see me do more of? What would you like to see me stop doing? Start, stop, continue. One of my favorite kinds of exercises. What should I start doing more of? What should I stop doing? And what should I continue to do? If they really are honest with you and they say, nah, you interrupt me too much, or you send mixed messages, or you seem really busy doing something else when I'm trying to tell you something, let them give you that feedback. Remind yourself to understand first, then be understood. As leaders, there's an absolute sense of humility and trust that can be built when we seek first to understand. When we ask questions of people, get their input, see it from their perspective, that helps build a relationship. We need to make sure we're checking our words, our tone, and our body language. And what I love about this, speaking of humble leadership, is that we can keep learning and practicing. I tell my staff a lot. A lot of times I will say to them, I make mistakes every day. It's okay to mess up. It's just on me to learn some new mistakes. I need to make different mistakes every day. One of the best things I can do, though, is when I am not a good listener, when I've missed some cues, when I'm not taking the time to do it, to stop and pause and own it. I'm sorry. I did not listen to this very well. I need to ask you to repeat it, and I promise I will pay better attention this time. These are the things we can do, right? Think about what you want to improve on. Think about what you want to be more intentional with. So I'm going to ask you at the bottom of your handout, you have 2 questions. Number 1, what do you want to improve on? And number 2, what do you want to be more intentional with when you're listening on a particular topic? Maybe that's handoffs. Maybe that's in a particular meeting. What do you want to accomplish and do better? So you have a couple of different ways you can answer that one. But what I would ask each of you today is, what would be a goal you want to work on? What would be something out of today's session that you're like, all right, go back to the earlier example I said to the company leader who says to me, why do I bring you in here to tell me things I already know? Because we all need reminders, myself included. What's something you could work on? I'm going to give you a quiet minute to come up with that. And then I'm going to ask each of you to share it back out, because it's one thing to think it. It's another thing to write it. It is another thing to say it out to coworkers who can actually hold you to it. Take a moment to think about that. What's one goal you want to set coming out of today, something you want to work on? And then we'll bring it back in about 2 minutes. All right. So as we bring it all together, here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to hear from each of you. What's something you're committing to working on from today? And then I'll share with you a few more things about the resources you have in the packet. So just to make sure I know who's talking, would you just, because I can't quite see all of you, would you just tell me who you are as you say it out to the group of what you're going to work on? So do I have a volunteer to go first?
Hello. Everybody wants to. I will. Mine is focusing on paying attention to the conversation. I've got so many things going on in my mind. I want to pay more attention to the conversation and then clarification. I don't always ask back what they are intending me to know. So those are the two things I want to work on.
Nice. Thank you, Paula. Good. Somebody else pick it up.
This is Tammy. I just want to, when I'm listening, stop what else I'm doing so that the person knows they have my full attention, and give eye-to-eye contact so they feel like what they're saying is important.
Awesome. Thank you. Someone else.
Saying, not
Let me go
interrupt
first.
conversations and not multitask it. Same as Tammy. Stop what I'm doing and listen.
Was
People
that Dan?
sometimes think I'm not listening and I really am.
Shane.
Okay.
Shane, that's the first time
Oh,
you've
Shane.
listened to me.
I only heard you, Tammy. I wasn't listening. Let's get it straight.
And keeping a good sense of humor. That helps. All
This
right.
is Randy.
That was Shane, right? Okay, there's Randy.
Multitasking. I
Me
always
too.
really bad at.
Yeah. Stop, pause, choose.
Yes.
Stop, pause, choose.
And then this is Colin, and pausing before getting distracted. That
Okay, good. Choose where your attention goes. Focus. Good. Someone else.
This is Dan. I want to focus on giving my coworkers time to speak when I'm listening with them, and I'm hoping that will bolster their confidence in having communication with me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a great way to show that you value them, that you want to hear from, that you're open to listening and learning from them. It's a great message to send. And being honest with them. If you can't right now, then say that. Yeah, good. Someone else.
This is Bree. Not filling in the silence or jumping my conversations.
Not
My brain
filling in the
just-
silence. What was the second part?
Jumping like the conversation. I'm always
Oh.
thinking ahead. My brain just moves so fast, so I just need to kind of stay focused in the conversation.
Good. Good. Who do we have left? Katrina?
I don't know. It is hard. I guess just pay more attention to the person speaking. Like I wander a lot on your topics.
Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, we have Sam and Mike left.
Okay. Wasn't sure who else was there.
Jamie, who?
Mike,
Mike is in there?
I'm multitasking when somebody's trying to talk with me,
Who was that?
that one kind of hits home with me.
Okay. Was that Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So multitasking.
Oh, Jane.
Sorry, just had a little hard time hearing you.
I forgot about me.
So we have two more, Jane and Sam.
Okay, I'm not sure who's all in the room, so I don't have everybody's names down. So help me out there. Who's going next?
Okay, this is Jane,
Thanks, Jane.
and I would like to learn to pause more. I tend to fill in silence. I'm uncomfortable with that, so.
Okay. Yeah, and it's just good to own it. Nothing wrong with the pause. But it's hard because we're just used to filling it in. Good one to work on. Who else?
Sam.
Mine would be multitasking and prejudging the conversation when I see certain individuals walking through.
Yes. All right, now, I'm sorry, who said that?
Sam.
Sam. Yeah, so everybody's going to help you out with that. Okay.
What if we all need help?
I would say-
I think we all need help.
Pretty hard
We
for her
all-
to listen to me when she turns and runs. She can't be done.
That's right.
Well, that tells us something about the body language then, right there. Right? Anybody else we missed?
I think we got everybody.
You know, I love this group sense of humor, and I love the humility that comes with that, that we all got stuff we got to own. Yet we want to keep building on that, right? The only way communication gets better is by working at it. And if each of you can commit to that one more piece to make this better, you're all going to be feeling the benefit of it. And that's really what we want to reinforce today. There is one last piece in the handout that if it's helpful for you, there is an assessment there just to give you some additional things to think about. So if, as we, even as we spend some more time together and some follow-up from this or other classes, I want to added this in, just take some of the things we've been talking about and puts them in more detail. So just owning it, right? How often do you tune people out? Do you concentrate on what's being said, even if you're not interested, right? Assume you know the talker's going to say. So a lot of these things we've talked about, but it just may give you a little additional detail to look at. And I don't have you score this. What I really want you to be able to look at is what are some of those areas you need to work on? And so that'll be just a good exercise for some follow-up, that as you want to work on this a little bit more, this just gives you some more examples of what we've been talking about today. Do you look at them? Do you concentrate on the meaning? What's the best time to say what you want to say? Think about how the other person might react. Consider the best way to make your communication, right? What way do I deliver that? Think about what kind of person you're talking to. What do you anticipate from your audience? Do you interrupt? Or do you assume they already know something? Just some additional reminders that bring up a few topics we haven't necessarily explored all the way to. So now I know what goals you're all working on, and you've said it in front of everybody else. So the key is, right, not to knock each other down, but to help support and encourage and even keep that sense of humor as you all work on that, because this brings it back to top of mind. We can make this better, but it takes attention. And I know you're busy. I know you're multitasking. You've got some pressure on you to keep this company successful in Owine. And you can do that today. Remember, a little bit of pause saves you some rework. A little bit of investment to listen a little bit better, stay focused, not judge, will actually get you better results. And that's something we all can be pretty proud of. Are there other questions for me today that you were thinking about as you were arriving for this training, or thinking about this training that, oh, I got to go to this afternoon. I have 300 other things I need to be doing, that you, maybe it did happen. Okay. That you were thinking, God, it would just be helpful if we talked about this. Anything that's on your mind or other questions?
I think Sam kind of hit a key point that we didn't really talk about much, about prejudging when we see someone. I know I was kind of thinking about that, but you kind of nailed it on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Because right there, we shut it down. So for example, I'll take a bank, and I'll say if we're doing a session in a bank, I'll say, when that car pulls up in the parking lot and you're already thinking to yourself, oh, there go my next 20 minutes, right? Sometimes, while we love all customers, we don't love all customers. When, think about it now on your cell phone, unless you're getting like spam calls from Uzbekistan, like I am these days, right? But if it's a number, right? You look at the number and go, oh, shoot, do I have to answer this? Right? That already prejudges the call. Now, I'm not saying that, it isn't challenging with some people, but it sure makes you less open to what this conversation's about to be, right? I'll give you an opposite example. I was in a session this morning, and my phone rang at 8 o'clock when I'm in session. I don't answer it, but it was my grandmother who's in California 2 hours earlier. And I knew the moment I saw it, right? And I went, oh, SHIT. She's not calling me at 6 a.m. with good news, right? So I prejudged, absolutely did. The other speaker was speaking. I said, I'll be back in a few minutes. Shut my video down, shut my sound off, and went, what's up, grandmother? Because I knew, right? It was my great uncle who had died. And unfortunately, COVID got him at 96. Doggone it, right? And I prejudged. But there is value. And the reason I share that is not to necessarily share that particular situation, but it puts us on cue. Because me prejudging who was on the other end of my phone, right, got me ready for what do I need to do to be ready for this conversation. So I think there's a good piece there in terms of balancing the prejudging. Because as soon as someone walks towards you and you're like, oh, or I think the example came up earlier, if they run the other way, there's your sign, right? But I think there's also a little bit of getting you ready for the conversation. And I think that's an important piece so that we're on deck ready to listen, because I was ready, right? It was personal. I knew it wasn't going to be good news at 6 a.m. California time. And especially when my grandmother is like a night owl. So 6 a.m. is not her time, right? And you should be at 93. You should be able to sleep whatever hours you want to sleep. But it also helped me be ready for the conversation. And so I think there's something to be said with that with employees. When an employee says, I need to talk to you, and you're like, uh-oh, what's this one going to be, right? What are they just about to lay on me? So I think there's just a good piece in there for us to consider. I don't want to prejudge, but I want to be ready. Yeah, good. Anything else that's on your mind? Thanks for putting an emphasis on that. I think it's a good one for all of us to consider. All right, this is where I say go forth and listen better. Always something we can work on. So I appreciate the participation this afternoon, the focus, even though I know the to-do list is still running through your brain of all the other things you'd be working on. Okay. You can do this better, and your teams will benefit from it. Your customers will benefit from it. I appreciate being along for the discussion. So we'll continue to stay in touch. We've got some follow-ups of this to do. And please let me know how I can help. Bree, anything else as we wrap this up?
I just need Colin, Randy, and Tammy to sign our sign-in sheet is all.
Yep, will do.
All right.
Yep, we'll catch you, Bree.
Perfect.
Sounds good. I will talk with you all soon. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good class.
Bree, I'll check in with you later. Take care. Bye, everybody.